Texas houses the fourth largest city in America. That city is Houston, which just happens to not have a zoning code. Not a weak one, not an outdated one, none. It is the only major city in the developed world operating without one. Fly over it and you see what that produces. Highways stacked 4 levels high, strip malls pressed against single-family homes, pressed against petrochemical facilities, nothing separating them. No buffer, no logic, no law requiring any. When Hurricane Harvey struck in August 2017, more than 154,000 structures flooded. FEMA confirmed over 30% sat on land, converted from prairie to pavement since 1990. According to the Brookings Institution's 2023 Urban Sprawl Index, Texas holds 3 of the 5 most sprawled metro areas in the entire United States. This is not deregulation by accident. Texas was legally engineered to grow this way, and the tool that built it has almost no equivalent anywhere else in the American South. People assume Texas sprawls because Texans want it that way. Big land, big trucks, big freedom. The culture explains the city, the thinking goes, except that explanation doesn't survive a single comparison. Dallas-Fort Worth consumes roughly twice the land area per resident compared to Charlotte, North Carolina, 2 metros that added population at similar rates between 2000 and 2020, according to the Urban Land Institute's 2021 Metro Sprawl Study. Atlanta, Nashville, Raleigh, and Charlotte have all passed regional planning frameworks, or urban growth boundaries, since 2000. No major Texas metro has. Not Houston, not Dallas, not San Antonio, not Austin. The structural gap runs deeper than planning documents. Georgia has 159 counties, every one of them with zoning authority. Tennessee counties zone. North Carolina counties zone. Virginia counties zone. Texas counties do not. Under Texas Local Government Code Section 231, county governments in Texas are explicitly prohibited from exercising zoning authority over private land. Even Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana, states not generally known for regulatory ambition, have county-level zoning authority that Texas explicitly removed from its books. 154 counties in Georgia control land use. 254 counties in Texas control nothing. That asymmetry is not a historical accident waiting to be corrected. It is a foundational legal choice made over a century ago and never reversed. The transit picture is the same. Texas has 13 cities with populations over 100,000 and no regional transit authority. Comparable southern states average 3. In Texas, road investment and land sprawl move together. Everything else, transit, density, walkability, stays optional. Not culturally optional. Legally, structurally, financially optional. This is not a preference story. This is an engineering story. Here is where people usually stop the analysis. Houston has no zoning. Therefore, Houston looks chaotic. That is the complete story, they think. Except that is only half of what is actually happening. Houston does have a land use document. It is called Chapter 42 of the City of Houston Code of Ordinances, and it governs minimum lot sizes, building setbacks, and off-street parking requirements. What it does not govern is use. Who builds what next to whom? That gap is the source of documented absurdity. In 2004, a federal court case, Blue Ox Adult Superstore versus City of Houston, arose directly from Houston's inability to use traditional zoning to regulate the location of sexually oriented businesses in residential areas. The city had no legal instrument to separate them, but the more important story inside Chapter 42 is not the absence of use controls. It is the presence of sprawl incentives hidden inside the substitute code itself. Houston's minimum parking mandates, which Chapter 42 preserves and in some zones expands, require so much surface parking per commercial square foot that low-density, auto-dependent development becomes the only financially viable option. Combined with minimum lot size requirements that effectively price out attached housing, Chapter 42 produces sprawl as reliably as any traditional zoning code, just through a different mechanism. This is the first reversal. Texas is not deregulated. Texas is selectively deregulated. Land use controls that would restrict sprawl are absent. Land use rules that produce sprawl remain fully in force. And on top of that, TxDOT, the Texas Department of Transportation, administers one of the most centrally directed state highway spending programs in the country, with $7.5 billion in metro highway expansion funded between 2000 and 2020. The freedom is pointed in exactly one direction, outward. Now put a person inside this system. Diana Davila represented District H on Houston City Council from 2016 to 2020. District H covers some of Houston's oldest working-class neighborhoods on the Near East Side, areas that sit inside the city limits, but abut unincorporated Harris County communities, where the legal geography of service delivery breaks down completely. The neighborhoods she documented, Cashmere Gardens, Trinity Houston Gardens, are inside the Houston metropolitan area in every functional sense. People there shop in Houston. They commute through Houston. When the flood came, the water did not observe the city boundary line, but the service obligations did. The city limit was a legal perimeter. It was also a service cutoff. And for flood infrastructure in Texas, that distinction was not bureaucratic trivia. It was the difference between a neighborhood with stormwater detention requirements and a neighborhood without them. When Hurricane Harvey struck in late August 2017, Cashmere Gardens and Trinity Houston Gardens flooded catastrophically. Davila's documentation of what followed made the legal gap visible in human terms. These neighborhoods fell outside city service territory for stormwater infrastructure because they were formally unincorporated. Harris County Flood Control District, the agency technically responsible, had no authority under Texas law to enforce stormwater detention standards on private development in unincorporated areas. The land had been paved. The detention requirements never followed. The comparison that makes this unacceptable, rather than merely unfortunate, is Nashville in 2010. When the Cumberland River flooded that May, Nashville's response was handled by a unified city-county government that Metro Nashville established in 1963. One agency, one service territory. No jurisdictional boundary splitting the same metropolitan community in half. FEMA's after-action analysis rated Nashville's recovery speed approximately 40% faster than Houston's 2017 equivalent, in part because of that administrative consolidation. Tennessee made that merger possible. Texas law did not make it possible for Harris County. And why Texas law was structured this way takes us directly to the mechanism that built the whole system, a constitutional clause written in 1912 and a mid-century growth machine that nobody in Austin wanted to stop. The mechanism is not complicated to describe. It is just almost never discussed in the same sentence as Houston's flooding. Article 11, Section 5 of the Texas Constitution grants home rule cities, cities with populations over 5,000 that adopt a home rule charter, broad powers of municipal annexation with minimal state legislative constraint. In practice, that meant Houston could absorb unincorporated land whenever it chose, extend city limits outward as fast as population and tax base demanded, and do so without immediately extending full infrastructure services to the annexed territory. Between 1948 and 1999, Houston annexed more than 500 square miles. To put that in physical terms, that is larger than the entire land area of the city of Los Angeles. The critical detail, documented by the Rice University Kinder Institute in their 2017 report, is that this annexation often followed a deliberate sequence. Annex the land, collect the property tax, delay the infrastructure, repeat. The Kinder Institute named this practice directly, annexation for revenue. The incentive structure was airtight. Texas has no state income tax. Municipal governments needed property tax base to fund operations and growth. Expanding the city boundary captured that base. Actually building the roads, the sewers, the stormwater detention systems that new residents needed was a cost to be deferred. As long as the boundary could keep moving outward, deferral was always preferable to expense. No other major southern state let this cycle run unchecked for as long as Texas did. Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia all passed annexation reform legislation between 1970 and 2000, specifically because their own cities were exhibiting the same revenue capture pattern. Texas watched this happen and passed nothing equivalent. Texas Senate Bill 6, which finally required resident consent before annexation, was not signed until 2019, and it arrived not from urban reform advocates fighting for flood victims, but from suburban Republican legislators tired of being absorbed by Democratic-leaning cities. Reform happened decades late, and without any remedy for the unincorporated communities already trapped inside the system. The highway side of the equation matched the land side exactly. TXDOT funded $7.5 billion in metro highway expansion between 2000 and 2020. Every new interchange, every tollway extension, every added lane mile made outer ring development more economically viable without transit, without density, without any of the service infrastructure that should have accompanied the tax revenue being captured. The sprawl machine ran on two rails simultaneously, the legal rail of annexation and the concrete rail of TXDOT spending. And the whole thing was visible in aggregate. The warnings existed, the studies had been written, the risk had been named. The warnings were not hidden, they were in the public record, available, named, and specific. In 2012, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, the regional planning body covering the greater Houston metro, published its Regional Hazard Mitigation Plan. That document explicitly flagged stormwater vulnerability in unincorporated Harris County, warning that rapid conversion of open land to impervious surface was increasing flood risk in communities outside city service boundaries. That was 5 years before Harvey. The Texas Water Development Board issued parallel warnings about prairie-to-pavement conversion in 2009 and again in 2014. The board had no binding enforcement authority over private development in unincorporated areas. Harris County had no legal mechanism to act on those warnings, even if it chose to. The warnings went into reports. The reports went into archives. And meanwhile, Harris County continued approving new subdivisions in flood-prone unincorporated land throughout the same period. Between 2000 and 2017, approximately 25,000 acres of Harris County wetlands and prairie were converted to residential and commercial development. Each new subdivision added impervious surface. Each acre paved reduced the land's capacity to absorb storm rainfall. The math was not mysterious. Meanwhile, the Texas Association of Builders, the primary lobbying organization for Texas home builders, worked actively against mandatory stormwater detention requirements in the state legislature. Between 2010 and 2018, according to Texas Ethics Commission campaign finance filings, the Texas Association of Builders contributed $4.2 million to Texas legislative candidates. Mandatory detention rules that might have slowed outer ring residential construction were repeatedly defeated. The Kinder Institute at Rice University published a 2015 analysis documenting something most observers had missed. Houston's market-only land use system was producing income segregation as measurable as any city with explicit exclusionary zoning, but through market mechanisms rather than legal ones. wealthy areas drove up land costs organically. Lower income residents sorted outward toward unincorporated zones with cheaper land and weaker service infrastructure. The outcome matched exclusionary zoning. The mechanism was different, and a different mechanism was much harder to legally challenge or politically name. By 2017, when Harvey arrived, every piece of this had been documented somewhere. The stormwater risk had been measured, submitted, and filed with multiple agencies over multiple years. The prairie conversion had been tracked. The lobbying had been recorded. The income sorting had been analyzed. What had not happened was the political consequence. What had been stopped, very effectively, was the regulation that would have made change mandatory. Then, Harvey hit, and the scale of what had accumulated became impossible to deny. In November 2018, Harris County voters approved a $2.5 billion flood control bond, the largest single flood infrastructure bond in United States history. Harris County Flood Control District announced 181 flood damage reduction projects, including more than 3,000 home buyouts in the highest risk corridors. It was real money, real projects, real movement. And here is the second reversal. The bond had been presented as the great equalizer, the great correction of what Harvey had revealed. For the communities that had been kept outside the service boundary for decades, it was finally the moment when the system would reach back and make them whole. In 2021, journalists at Texas Tribune and ProPublica conducted an investigation into how that $2.5 billion was actually being distributed across Harris County. Their findings were precise and damning. Unincorporated communities, the neighborhoods that had flooded worst, that had been identified by the Houston-Galveston Area Council's 2012 Hazard Mitigation Plan, that had the weakest infrastructure going into the storm, received disproportionately less of that capital than incorporated neighborhoods. The bond that was sold as Harris County's flood reckoning was largely investing in the parts of the county that already had the most protection. The reason, again, was structural. Harris County Flood Control District's project prioritization methodology weighted cost-benefit ratios calculated largely on property values. Higher value incorporated neighborhoods scored better on those ratios. Lower value unincorporated communities scored worse. The flood bond did not reproduce the inequality intentionally. It reproduced it mechanically through a cost-benefit framework designed before the bond was passed. Texas Senate Bill 6, signed in 2019, did stop new revenue annexation. Future municipalities could no longer absorb land without resident consent. The cycle that had built the problem was interrupted, but it was interrupted after 50 years. And it was interrupted without creating any mechanism to extend services to the communities already sitting on the wrong side of the boundary line. The reform arrived. The equity gap it was supposed to address got wider where it mattered most, in the neighborhoods where the water had been deepest and the recovery capital was thinnest. Go back to the aerial image now. The highways stacked 4 levels high. The strip malls pressed against homes, pressed against industrial facilities. The absence of visible logic. When people look at Houston from above and try to explain what they see with phrases like freedom or the Texas way, they are describing the output of a machine without seeing the machine. The machine was Article 11, Section 5 of the Texas Constitution. It was the absence of county zoning authority under Texas Local Government Code. Section 231. It was the annexation for revenue cycle that the Rice University Kinder Institute documented in 2017, and that Houston ran for 50 years before anyone in Austin had reason to stop it. It was $7.5 billion of TxDOT money that paved the outer ring every time the inner ring started to fill. It was the Texas Association of Builders and $4.2 million in legislative contributions that kept stormwater detention optional until the water made it impossible to ignore. It was a 2012 hazard mitigation plan sitting in an archive while approvals for flood-prone subdivisions continued. Texas didn't become different from the rest of the South by accident. It became different because the legal architecture that other southern states dismantled or never adopted in the first place was left fully intact in Austin. The culture absorbed the consequences. The communities took on the water. The system kept building. Houston doesn't look like Atlanta because Texans are different. It looks like Houston because the law was written to make sure it never had to look like anything else.